So hello and welcome to our conversations about housing and homelessness. My name is Max Chauvin, and I am the chair of the Housing and Homelessness Partnership in HRM. And the partnership is a multi-agency group that includes government, private sector, and other public sector organizations that are committed to ending homelessness and ensuring affordable housing for everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Mi'kma'ki and Wollastock peoples first signed with the British Crown in 1725. These treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kma'ki and Wollastock title and established the rules for what was going to be an ongoing relationship with nations. Today we are pleased to have Mayor Mike Savage and Councillor Wei Mason from HRM, who are going to share some of their thoughts of what the municipality is doing in addressing homelessness and addressing affordable housing. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Max.
Good morning, Maxwell.
So why don't we start with you, Mayor Savage. What fees has HRM eliminated for not-for-profit housing providers, and how does this help them?
All right. Well, thank you very much, Max, and thank you to the partnership. Gui, good morning, bonjour, everybody. Welly Exelbook. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm happy to be here with you, Max, and our interpreter friend, but also with my friend and colleague, Councillor Mason. The first thing I have to say, and I'll get to the specifics on the fees, but you know, we were elected, Wei and I, in 2012. You know, we were fresh-faced new councillors, way more fresh-faced than I was still. And at our very first session, and the meetings were happening across the way at the Trade and Convention Center at the time, because they were redoing City Hall for the newer, smaller council. And we had a blue sky session of what was supposed to be our mandate for the first 4 years of that council. And Wei and I, Jen Watts, and perhaps others spoke to the issue of housing, and we were kind of, I wouldn't say shut down, but there was certainly opposition expressed to the fact that we should even be talking about housing, that that's not our core mandate, and we should be focusing on other things. And I was very pleased that within about a year or so, I brought a motion to council to set up the Housing and Homelessness Partnership. It started with conversations I had with Catherine Woodman and some other council colleagues at the time. And you know, it led to some very positive things, a Housing First project up in Goddard Street. But so I think that the thinking of council has expanded very much over the time that Wei and I have been on council, and I give Wei a lot of the credit for that. Specifically on the fees and what we can do. So everybody knows that when you build affordable housing, there's obviously a number of components that go into it. There's the labor cost, there's the construction cost, materials cost, there's permitting fees are a part of that. So we now have it so that if you're a registered nonprofit or a charitable housing organization, you're eligible to have the majority of your municipal related construction fees waived. So municipal fees related to construction permits, for example, subdivision approval, site plan approval, variances, planning applications, and things like that. Nonprofit charitable housing developments can also apply for that same tax relief. A recognition that, as we'll talk about with some other things, and in inclusionary zoning and how we approach secondary suites and things like that, that we do have a role to play. So mandate, you could argue that, but you know, I always said, I remember Mayor Nenshi from Calgary came down early on in my time as mayor and we did a session with, I think, the Downtown Halifax Business Commission, and I said at that when it comes to housing, that the feds have the money, the province have the jurisdiction, but the cities have the problem. And then she's used that quite a few times and credited me for that, but that's the fact. we can't ignore that these are important. So then there's the other issue. Another big chunk of fees is Halifax water fees, and so we need to work with the UARB on that one to sort of say, you know, what can we do? We can't, as a municipality, tell Halifax Water that they have to, you know, reduce their fees. But the UARB have certainly, you know, given Halifax Water indication that they can extend support for affordable housing as well. So approving the utility's ability to defer regional development charge payments and things like that. So trying to figure out all the components of fees. I have to say that in terms of government fees, probably the biggest one is the HST, which is obviously provincial. I think that's something that the provincial government could look at, and I've had a conversation with the Premier, the new Premier, about that. So fees are a big piece of it. If you're going to build affordable housing in our city, whether it's in the core of the city, whether it's in any other area that needs support, we want to find a way to make sure that we're cooperating on the fee side of things to make it easier for you.
Great. Thank you very much. Wei, what about density bonusing? We hear that in the news. And so I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about that and how that impacts affordable housing.
Sure. Thanks, Max. Well, density bonusing is a relatively new tool for Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada. We have it in the downtown zone that was popularly called HRM by design, but at that point it didn't impact affordable housing. With the center plan, what we've done is where we're zoning larger, taller buildings along corridors. Part of what we heard from the public was, sure, you know, we're going to get more housing, but what's in it for us where we're changing these rules and we're allowing this height? What does the community get something back? And so any building in the center plan over 2,000 square meters, they have to pay for every additional meter up to a maximum that's allowed in that zone. And that funding will go toward, 2/3 of it will go toward affordable housing. You know, our estimate right now is that the density bonusing program in the regional center will generate probably $1 million to $2 million a year, and that allows us to actually have skin in the game, funding for the first time since the province took over housing in 1996. The density bonus program could be result in us using the money to help on a per door basis with the not-for-profits, or it could be other. There's other potential investments we could make to help use that money to create more affordable housing. And so we created an affordable housing grant program that uses the money to provide grants to not-for-profits. We can't yet give money. There's no tools at this time provincially. We're specifically not allowed to give money to for-profit businesses or individuals. So the affordable housing grant money has to go to not-for-profits. That may change in time, but right now we see a lot of opportunity to use that funding to create affordable housing.
Excellent.
Can I speak to,
sad. Oh, go ahead.
Wei encapsulated that all very well. One of the things with bonusing is that housing is not the only thing that covered under density bonusing. And I think Wei and I had a conversation about this recently. There are some things that really shouldn't be included in density bonusing. Housing is the biggest thing that we want to make sure that we get the benefit of, and I think Wei's going to be bringing something to council in that regard. It's a huge issue for us, and I think it's one where we can play a significant role.
Yep.
Excellent, thanks. When Mayor Savage spoke, he mentioned secondary or backyard suites, Wei, and I'm wondering how they make a difference and how they play into the affordable housing landscape.
So, you know, there's been a lot of talk amongst planners and urbanists about how having an R1 zone, single family home on a lot with no opportunity to make it multiple units is kind of dangerous and creates an opportunity or creates a situation where you have kind of like a classist and economic divisions in your community. And so the idea of secondary and backyard suites is that and we passed this in September 2020, is that you can put a suite or a unit effectively no larger than what you're allowed to build for a garage in the backyard, or you can put it in a basement or secondary suite somewhere in your house in every zone. It's allowed in every zone. And the idea is that this is what they call gentle density. It's not necessarily going to make the neighborhood look any different, but it will create the opportunity to see more units. They're commonly called in-law or granny suites in the basement or in the backyard. And so, the goal here is to create more housing options to make sure that we have mixed income and mixed use in all neighborhoods, and that the aging in place piece and the ability to support seniors or people who need care is a big part of that. What's interesting is, so it only came in September, and just today I did an interview with a reporter, and forgive me, Francis, for stepping on the story you haven't published yet, but she told me that there's been over 50 permits pulled for secondary suites since we adopted it, and it was approved by the minister. So that's just in the last 4 or 5 months. That's not a lot. That doesn't solve the housing crisis. But just to contrast that, she said that in the previous 3 years, when it came to conversions or putting in a small secondary suite in the zones that allowed that, there'd only been 100. So it definitely, it appears, despite COVID and despite it not being construction season and all that stuff, that it has generated a lot of interest in creating more small units, affordable bachelors and one bedrooms.
If someone's just hearing about this, where do they go to maybe get more information?
There's a whole landing page on the halifax.ca website, so you can start there. And my colleagues might hate to hear me say this, but email your counselor, and we'd all be happy to help.
Max, on that point, it was interesting. When we bought this in, we had a public hearing, and there was opposition, strong opposition from some communities who seemed to feel that they would be inundated with new residents who were renters as opposed to owners. And our colleague, who Wayne and I have great regard for, Sam Austin, summed it up very well, I thought, at the public hearing when he said, most of us start out renting. Did we suddenly become different people when we owned a house? So we do have a rental housing crisis in the city. I think that this is going to be part of the solution.
Excellent. No, I've heard other people talk about it too, and very excited about the possibilities it creates.
Well, I think making neighborhoods, more varied of all different kinds of people, as Way spoke to, makes us better, not worse, as communities and overall.
And I've certainly had some concern from people that this would change the nature of some of the neighborhoods, but I've heard far more concern from people that the way the market's changing, and with the housing crisis we have right now, that their own adult children can't afford to live in the neighborhood, right? Or that they, so there's this whole trying to keep whole communities or all ages and all generations in a community piece, which I think this helps address as well, for sure.
Yeah, I think there's you hear a lot of those families who are facing those hard choices. Yeah, so that's great. Mayor Savage, we've heard in the news about the Federal Rapid Housing Initiative, and that HRM received $8.7 million to support housing. How is the municipality going to invest that money?
I think that's. I appreciate that question. That was an important project for us because it showed that we can do things quickly when we need to, that some of these solutions, and it was called the Rapid Housing Initiative, and in some ways it put a big pressure on our staff and council to get this done, but you can't have a rapid housing initiative and do it slowly. That was the whole point. So we received 16 submissions. Staff did tremendous work. Kelly Denty, Kate McClellan, we have got amazing staff. I'm going to just say at this point, we are adding people to our staff in this year's budget to work specifically on housing, because nobody really, in spite of the great people who've worked on it, like Kate and Kelly, we need people specifically dedicated to this, and I'm glad that that's in our upcoming budget. 16 submissions, 3 projects recommended to council, a great discussion at council, and we provided the money directly to $2.9 million to the Mi'kmaq Friendship Center to create 17 units, $4 million to ADSOM, that people will know, women and children, to create 25 units, and $1.2 million to the North End Community Health Association, which created 10 units. So these all had to be identified by the end of November, and they have to be built within a year. So there is a priority on getting this done very quickly. If I could just say a couple of things about it. Number one, we were one of the few, if not the only city, who was given this opportunity that don't have the core housing mandate. In places like Ontario, BC, that the cities actually have a core mandate for housing. So I was very pleased, and I remember the municipal election was in October, Way, you remember that municipal election in October in spite of COVID, and it was only within a week or so of that I had a call from the minister, Ahmed Hussein, the federal minister, saying, "Look, we're putting up this fund, and we're going to suggest Halifax be one of the cities involved." And I said, "That's fabulous. That's awesome." But we were one of the few that we didn't have the infrastructure, and that's why our staff. I really appreciate and tip my hat to the staff who went out and did that work. So, and I also have to acknowledge. I don't have to. I want to acknowledge the provincial government stepping up and putting money in for operating, because my history in elected politics leads me very strongly to the belief that governments are very good at announcing new projects, not very good at the operational funding, and that has to happen. So the provincial government stepped in and supported that as well. So 8.7 million, the Mi'kmaq Friendship Center, ADSM, and the North End Community Health Association. And we also now have got a bank, like specific list of organizations who can do this, who didn't get funded this time, so that as we set up our housing trust and start to look at projects that we can do, we know that there are community partners out there who can do this work. I wish we could have funded more. We could easily have, but we were pleased to be part of it, and I think it will make a difference. And I think it'll make a difference, in short order.
Thanks, Mayor Savage. And I know that we're doing one of these discussions with each month through April, May, and June. And in June, we're hoping that we'll have some of the folks involved in the work you just mentioned as our guests on that episode. Wei, one of the last thing that the mayor mentioned in his opening comments about some of the tools is inclusionary zoning. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about that and how that helps.
Sure, Max. So similar to the kind of concerns we heard during the center plan public engagement process, we've heard from people in the community, both at that time and in other settings, how come we can't make that tower with 100 units in it have a couple of affordable housing units? How come we are allowing new construction, be it large developments like the one proposed at Penhorn Mall to a small apartment building on the peninsula, be entirely driven by the market? And the way to try and ensure that people of all incomes can live in all neighborhoods is this idea of inclusionary zoning, where a percentage of all new development is required to be affordable housing, either in the zone or even in that individual development. So there's a bunch of different ways you could do it. It could be, 5% of every building that's built over a certain size has to have affordable housing in it, or it could be that they have to cause affordable housing to happen there or nearby. And so to be able to do that, the municipality needs the municipal charter changed. We don't have the legal ability to require that, or indeed right now, Halifax, we've had some developers who have offered, and we have extended to them additional development rights because they say they're going to put in affordable units, but we don't have the ability to enforce that because the charter doesn't speak to it. If they don't put the affordable units in, we can't compel them to do that. So we've been asking since December 2017 for the province to change the charter to enable that. It hasn't happened yet, but we're always hopeful, and we believe there's a chance this may be addressed in this session or the next session.
Excellent. Well, that would be really exciting. Mayor Savage, what role does municipal surplus land currently play in the affordable housing challenges?
Well, we think it can play a significant role. The city of Halifax, municipality of Halifax, we have land. It's one of the things we do have, and we think that we can use that land effectively for housing. We do have an administrative order that already allows us to look at land that becomes surplus and look at community needs and work with organizations to see if they can fill that need. And I think that's really important as well, keeping in mind that all the things that we want to fund as a city, we need revenue coming in to do those projects. And some of the revenue we have is on surplus land. But we think that we can do this. I mean, we did an exam in November, I guess it was, we agreed to sell 3 parcels of land to the Affordable Housing Association, True North Crescent, I think it was called, for $1 a piece. And these were lands that were actually identified back in the early 1990s. When my father was the mayor of Dartmouth and Wei was in grade 2, It was identified way back then as land that could be used for affordable housing. And so we said, okay, well, we have these pieces of land. We think that we should be able to do something with them. And so we came to an agreement. So we do have a new surplus land category specific to affordable housing. Surplus land can be made available to registered nonprofit and affordable housing organizations at less than market value, at some percentage less than market value. In this case, they were provided for nothing. Land is, of course, a big cost towards the construction of affordable housing. I think we all recognize that. And, we're looking at things like land trusts and trying to figure out the best way that we can use the assets that, that we have. And I think that that's really important. In the same way, for example, Max, as you would recall some years ago, one of our new councillors, Kathy Daigle-Gammon, Executive Director, we donated land in Burnside, or almost virtually donated it so that the new building could be built for Dask Industries. And so these are ways that cities can help. And there's an opportunity cost for the land, but I think it's really important that we look at those assets that we have, and we do have land, and other orders of government have land as well, and making those available to people who want to build affordable housing, I think, is really important.
And I think the other kind of issue around land is that we have some very large parcels that we've chosen to sell and not hold for affordable housing. And that goes back to the issue that the mayor mentioned a minute ago around rapid housing, which is it's not just about having land, it's about having the money to operate. So, for us, we're trying to measure is this, if we put this land out to development and we can capture density bonusing, or in the case of some land we sold recently in Bloomfield, require 10% of the units be affordable for 50 years, then it's different paths to the same goal. But what we don't want is we don't want to have large pieces of land like we've seen with and the city wasn't directly involved with either of these, but we've seen a couple of large pieces of land, Creighton and Garish Society on the old Sobeys on Cottagen Street sat there for 20 years. Trying to get to a point that they could develop. So what we want to do is find quick hits where it's something that's doable, like these rapid housing projects, like the True North Crescent, and make sure that all the components can come together so that we actually see shovels in the ground and units being built as quickly as possible, rather than having them sit there fallow, unused for a long period of time.
And as much as possible, as you would, Max, also to make sure that as we do this, that these are on places that are near transit, where people can actually get to work and not require vehicles and stuff like that. So I think it's important to look at all these things that we're trying to do on housing through a couple of lenses. One is certainly, affordable, attainable housing. The other would be that it would be sustainable, that it would be environmentally responsible, and also accessible. Paul Vina would be mad at me if I didn't mention the importance of making sure that some of these units that are being built, that over which we have some control, are accessible for people with disabilities, mobility challenges as well.
Absolutely. So the municipality's done quite a bit in the past couple of years to help address these problems. What's coming in the next 6 months, 12 months, and so on? What are you working on now?
Wade, do you want to go first on that? We'll share this.
Sure. Well, I think the one that I'm most proud of that I've been really pushing for is the registration and licensing of rental properties. So we know that there are issues with the quality of some rental units. Most landlords obviously don't do that, but there are some properties that don't meet any kind of safe and minimum standard, and so we're trying to expand and change the way that the city doesn't have responsibility for tenancy, but it has responsibility for buildings and fire and life safety and building code. We want to make sure that is being met. You want to do a couple there, Mike, Mr. Mayor, sir?
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's a whole host of things that I think we're going to be looking at over the next number of years. Airbnb is a big one. We know that Airbnb has impacted on housing affordability. We've talked to the Airbnb folks about that. Obviously, with COVID, there aren't people in a lot of those units, but council has taken some action. A number of councillors, Councillor Smith, for example, has been very active on that one, and making sure that we're not impacting negatively. Building new housing or existing housing where a lot of the units are being taken up for Airbnb is not a a useful thing. I think one of the things we really want to look at is housing for seniors and aging in place. It makes no sense for somebody in, Musquodoboit Harbor to raise their kids and then sell their house for $300,000 and have to buy a condo for $400,000 in Dartmouth. So trying to find out, working with community, where we can find some opportunities for people who can continue to live where they've always lived. So I think aging in pace is a big one. I'll say one more, then I'll go to Way. I'm sure he's got others. We also need to look, and this goes into the whole coming out of COVID piece, we need to look at buildings that are now going to be empty or largely empty, whether it's office buildings because of people working from home, whether it's hotels, and that was something that the feds kind of highlighted in the Rapid Housing Initiative, but seeing if we can repurpose some of those buildings for affordable housing. Residential, certainly, but even in some cases for affordable. Those will be a few things. Where you want to go?
Well, I think one of the things that came out of the Rapid Housing Initiative applications is 2 or 3 of them were based around tiny homes, like Lake City Woodworkers has been working on tiny homes. And, the fact is that the land use bylaws don't really allow tiny homes, especially in the suburban areas where the rules were adopted in the 1970s, when I was, in fact, in second grade, Mr. Mayor. And so those... to enable those, and most people, I get a lot of communication from residents saying, how come you don't allow this? And so we'll allow a backyard suite, but we won't allow a community or a cul-de-sac or a laneway that's got 4 or 5 houses, tiny homes on it. So that's a big one. And then another one that I'm quite proud of that I'm glad to see is coming back soon is council actually voted to direct staff to enter into a discussion with the province about potentially taking housing back. I talked about it before. In 1996, housing was put up to the provincial level. So the money and the authority, all the federal funding, 99% of what's going on in housing is happening at a provincial level. We are one of only 2 municipalities that doesn't do housing in Canada, us and Winnipeg, in medium and large size cities. So we have a report coming back about whether or not, there's an opportunity to expand our current role, which could be, it's not an all or nothing thing. There's a whole bunch of different stages between us running the whole shebang and the province continuing the way it is. But I think it's a discussion we need to have. Certainly our residents believe, and I blame national media because they see Toronto and Ottawa doing stuff that Halifax doesn't do because they have the authority and the money and the legal authority in Ontario that we don't have. And I think it's worth exploring because there's a lot of power having your housing division and your planning department in the same entity. So we'll see what comes from that. It'll be a big discussion, and I can't say that there's unanimity on council or the MLAs about how it should go, but I think it's a discussion we need to have.
Well, we're almost at a time, gentlemen, but we've had a couple of questions in the chat. We won't get to all of them, but one of them, Way, was about tiny homes. And where are tiny homes allowed right now?
Well, basically, they're only really allowed as backyard suites, and possibly they could be done in a land lease community similar to where mobile homes are being used. But generally, the size of lot, the minimum size of lot that they'll allow a building to be built on is usually, 2,500 or 3,000 square feet in some of the oldest parts of the city. And once you get out into the suburbs, it gets up to 5,000 and 6,000 square feet. And so those kind of rules don't really enable tiny homes. So what we want to do in both center plan and in the suburban plan that comes after it is allow tiny homes similar to how we're trying to allow townhouses by right in more zones. So we are working on that. We know it's an issue, but right now they're not really able to happen in a wide scale way.
Maybe time for one more question. While not-for-profits have an important role to play in offering and operating affordable housing, they're about a fraction of all the housing in the city. And people are wondering, what is the city doing with the private sector to make sure that all of us are part of the solution to building and operating affordable housing throughout the city?
So I'll take a crack at that. Look, the private sector has stepped up, I think, significantly in this whole discussion. As you know, Max, when you work in partnership, Jeremy Jackson has been an active player in this for 6 years, and other developers have indicated an interest in being a source of a solution for this. And right now we have almost 10,000 people coming a year to Halifax. So that means we probably need in the range of 5,000 or 6,000 new units a year just to keep up with that. So we have to look at the real affordable housing needs of people and provide the kind of dignity and a roof that everybody needs. We also need to make sure that we're reacting quickly enough to the demands of the marketplace and creating communities with private sector developers who have some very good ideas, and some of them exist right now. So I think there's the whole spectrum of affordable housing and attainable housing that we need to look at, and I think we can do that. The city has to and has accepted a responsibility, even though it doesn't say in the charter or the MGA, the Municipal Government Act, that this is what we are. This is our issue. This is what we're seized with, and I believe that this council will go wherever we need to go to find the solutions, and the private sector will be very much a part of that.
Yeah, and if I may add, Max, the housing crisis now, because of the population growth the mayor spoke about, is now impacting all but the wealthiest people in the community. Every level of housing, all of the deciles in the housing and homelessness report are now under tremendous pressure. And so private sector is a huge part of that. And our population growth, having spiked up the last 2 years, means that as much as many residents are concerned about the pace of change being too fast, we actually need to build 1,500 to 2,000 more units than we have been every year for the foreseeable future. So we need to enable that as a municipality, and that is in our control. So that's why we're doing the center plan and then the suburban plan. We need to make it easier to get high quality housing built, not to give the developers whatever they want, but to make sure we say this is what we want and encourage them to build it.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, we're pretty much out of time. Like to make a couple of acknowledgments. First to Mike Hall and Atlantic Live Stream, who has made this and the other 3 of these interviews we're doing, one each month, possible. And also thank you to the Society for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Interpreter Service, who was able to join us today to provide that, and much appreciated by everybody. And obviously, gentlemen, special thanks to both of you for taking some time out today to come and share some information. There are probably more questions, so I'm sure people will be in touch with both of you as the face of it. And also a thank you to United Way, who is the secretariat of the partnership and provides much of the logistic support to make these things happen. And I also would encourage, if people have questions after this, Kevin Hooper is one of the staff at United Way, and if you'd like to reach out to him, he'd be happy to help direct questions to the right people to get answers for everyone. So again, thanks everybody today. Thanks, gentlemen. And we will be doing our next one in April, and at that time talking to the Affordable Housing Association in Nova Scotia. So
thanks, Max.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks very much.